Hey peeps, it's Tripl-L, and now let's talk My Hero Academia chapter 130. Listen to the real truth. So guys, this chapter was pretty good. It had a pretty big moment for Izuku in it. Izuku did go and he did get pretty upset after a situation that unfolded, and he went to confront All Might. Now I have my thoughts on that whole situation, and overall I'm very happy with it, and it's gonna generate a lot of discussion for me. So, you know, in terms of a worthwhile chapter, this chapter is pretty worthwhile. Now this chapter I also had to do a lot of research for. I had to go back through a lot of the previous pages, mostly the chapters involving Night Eye, because one of the things in this chapter is the flashback where we get like the whole sequence between Night Eye, the principal, and All Might, how they're talking about All Might's going a bit too far for his ideals, and we get a lot of talk about Night Eye looking at All Might. And that was really odd because before this I was of the understanding that Night Eye's particular quirk is that once you look at a person, you can see what they're doing for upwards of the next hour. The way that that was initially worded in the manga stream translation, I was under the impression that it's Night Eye can only see 1 hour in advance at any point in time. Well, when you look at the wording of that particular translation, and then when you consider that Japanese is kind of hard to translate and retain all the meaning, it's very possible when you take this flashback into consideration, since they're alluding that Night Eye was able to see farther into the future than 1 hour, it comes to the conclusion that the quirk, the way it works, is that for the 1 hour period after Night Eye makes eye contact with the person, he can look as far as he wants. He can look anywhere down the road. Now, if that is the case, it justifies how Night Eye could potentially have seen All Might ultimately dying. The problem here is though that we don't know how many eventualities Night Eye can actually see. We don't know if Night Eye is actually viewing parallel realities or alternate realities, because when you have a character who's looking this far into the future, and with the way that Night Eye seems to explain his power and the way he seems to talk about it, he seems to give the idea that he can do something to kind of shift the future around. Like if he saw something that he didn't like, he could potentially do something to act against it. But we don't know the specifics for his power. And now that we know that he can actually just look at someone's future for the next hour, and you know, the hour being like a time period that he's allowed to look into the future, it's just a question of what exactly is the weakness of Night Eye's quirk? And what exactly are the rules to him looking this far into someone's future? I imagine when he looks at All Might, he just picks a time period, like he looks forward 5 years in the future, and maybe throughout his whole time he's just been kind of whittling down to the point where he saw what he described as an end too gruesome to describe. So, you know, it's a very interesting thing, this quirk that Night Eye has, and I'm actually a bit more, I really want the full specifications on this quirk, and I want to know whether or not Night Eye seeing the future can he actually do something about it, or is it the kind of thing where even if you see the future and you try to do something against it, the time will correct itself and it will ultimately get the same goal? Because what happens here with this future seeing power, and now that it's going potentially into years and years of someone's future, it's now a question of, does the Boku no Hero Academia, does that universe run on the assumption of parallel realities, or does it run on the assumption of determinism, where there is only one set path and any deviations will ultimately just return to the one set path? Night Eye's presenting a very interesting thing in this chapter, and it's just gonna be interesting to see it unfold. And there's more credits to this idea because, like, in the chapter as well, Night Eye was saying that he should have been looking at Deku and Lumillion, because maybe he could have seen that interaction happening. You know, it's really odd. It's a really odd quirk, and this is one of those quirks that you maybe don't want to explain really well, because once you get involved with time, things get really messy to explain. So this might be one of those powers where the author has to leave it vague, only so that he doesn't get caught in any kind of trappings that come out from knowing the future. Anyway, let's talk about Izuku, Night Eye, and All Might, because this is by far my favorite part of the chapter, and I am going to tear into Izuku pretty hard right now, because Like, the things that he said in this chapter 2 just go to show you that this is where the author is taking this. So, in the chapter, let's begin with Izuku's biggest offense in the chapter. It's not really him getting angry. I mean, like, in terms of the discussion. When he's talking to Night Eye, and before Night Eye starts berating him, Izuku mentions that he did not think Shizaki was that dangerous. He did not think Overhaul was that dangerous. And as viewers, as readers, we all know that is so wrong. Overhaul is exceedingly dangerous, and worse off, he has an idiosyncrasy which makes him extremely unstable and hard to predict. So that statement is there specifically to tell the viewer that Izuku is in the wrong on this, and so it makes whatever Night Eye say afterward, it makes it have more justification behind it, because as viewers or as readers, we know Izuku's flat out wrong. His instincts are off on Shizaki. The man is dangerous. Overhaul is dangerous. So here Night Eye goes off and he tells Izuku about the flat out of the matter, that sometimes you can't just go gung-ho. You need to plan, you need to figure this out. And especially when you're dealing with organized crime, these are the kind of people that you need to be careful with. These aren't the one and done villains, the ones who just go and attack for like whatever reason just because they want to see the world burn. No, these are guys with a purpose, and they have enough of an organizational structure that you have to be careful with them. Now, I largely agree with Night Eye. I think the situation is much more complicated. He talks about the benefit of forward thinking and planning out maneuvers to make sure the best possible outcome is had, instead of just going willy-nilly and trying to do everything in the one moment and hope that everything works out and just disregard the future. So the actual metaphor here, because when you start considering All Might, you can see that All Might would probably not exactly agree with Night Eye. But then when you take into account the quirks that both characters are packing, Night Eye packs future sight. So naturally, forward planning, forward thinking would be more Night Eye's angle. That's going to be how he solves problems. All Might, he had the power to just go and do whatever he wanted, because again, One for All is a really strong physical quirk. It can let the user do almost anything. All Might's power is at a ridiculous level. All Might stands at the point where he can use his power and he can forward his own agenda, he can forward his own methodology with the power he has. Izuku isn't in that position, and this is something I said last week. Izuku's not in that position, so he's not in the position where he can just assume that he can just go willy-nilly, go guns a-blazing, and hope that everything's going to work out. Because that just won't work in this situation. When you have a situation where someone's quirks just aren't game-breaking powerful, you have to take the more methodological approach. I know I messed up that word. But anyway, that whole little segment, what really matters here is that Izuku is getting berated on what he's been doing so far. And what's worse is coming from someone who Izuku knows doesn't really want him to hold on to One for All. So what you end up getting here is that Izuku is being berated for what he believes in. He's getting scolded for his way of doing things. And you know, it's an unpleasant situation, but what this ends up doing is that it sets up Izuku to be pretty upset. Like, when I see Izuku talking to All Might, yes, I understand he's a bit confused, but really what seems to be triggering him, I think he's also just lashing out for being upset, right? Like, I think he's legitimately upset over what Night Eye has said to him, because it's kind of like changing your worldview. Like, it's challenging your current worldview, and it's kind of reminding you that you're not the best after all, that maybe you aren't so special. And so when you have that situation, then Izuku gets into that weird headspace where he's just, it's again upsetting because he's being challenged on what he thinks is the way of doing things. And then he has to go to the only person he knows that has the answers, which is All Might, and he ends up kind of lashing out at him. You know, I do think legitimately it is him lashing out. Like, yes, he wants to know about the history, the reasoning, what's going on here, because there seems to be more going on. But what ultimately triggers him to doing that is just that whole talk with Night Eye. Now, I'm pretty happy about this, you know, I'm pretty happy about it. It's a nice development for Izuku. It's better that Izuku gets his world view shaken now than when in the middle of a fight. It's better that this growth happens now when there's a relative time of peace. and so no one gets hurt in Izuku being in this upset state of mind. So overall, I'm very happy for this development for Izuku. Anyway, Izuku does follow up with All Might, and they're talking about it. They're just pretty much being told that, yeah, you know, Togata was up in the running, but he didn't meet him. So ultimately, All Might chose Izuku. And then Izuku just finds out the general opinions that Night Eye had. Ultimately, I don't see that talk as super impactful. I mean, it's just filling in some blanks and like maybe giving Izuku closure and justifying why All Might didn't want to tell him about All Might's darkest moment or just his where he was in that point in time. But does it really make a difference? Does it make a difference knowing that All Might was, yeah, like people had gotten Togata together and like All Might was gonna have to meet him to see if he was worthy of it? I mean, the thing that All Might didn't even meet the boy, like that already I think makes the whole situation a moot point. I think this is just the characters need, or sorry, Izuku needs that closure. But overall, nothing's really changed. At least I don't think so. We knew All Might was damaged. We knew All Might had that injury. We knew that All Might's day as a hero was going to be going down. We knew that people around All Might were most likely worried for him. We knew that All Might came to UA to find a successor. You know, these are all little bits of details that we knew before. Like the one thing that Izuku didn't know was that there was someone else that was being considered. And so it's just really a giant hit to his ego more than anything else. And when I say ego, I don't mean like the really loud like Bakugo's ego. I mean like ego in the terms of the psychology, just his general personality, his general thought, his general consciousness, that kind of ego. So yeah, you know, overall this chapter was a chapter that was heavy on character development. It was heavy on character development, and I'm ultimately very happy for it. I ultimately also agree with Night Eye when it comes to his opinions on anyone that isn't All Might, because All Might's the kind of person who has the power to back up his ideals. Everyone else, I feel Night Eye's methodology might be the more correct. Anyway guys, I really love this chapter. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. Let me know what you thought, and yeah, till next time, I hope you have a great day.